Thank you for staying with us. And this morning conversation is basically about education, and it's about tertiary education, that has to be, for anyone to gain admission into tertiary education in Nigeria, you have to, after your O-level exams, be it WAEC, NAPTEP, or NECO conducted exams, then you have to write an entrance examination, which is coordinated by the Joint Admission and Matriculations Board, Jamb, in Nigeria. That's the body saddled with that function. And so the UTME exam is what is written, and it has been on for years, and it has metamorphosed from, the paper written exams to now what we have, the CBT. And but that is not the news. The news, what broke out last week when the result was released, and the figure was put at over 1.9 million students, who wrote their exams. And when the result was released, we learned, according to JAMB, more than 73% of them, failed, because at least you can say they failed because they couldn't even get beyond the 200 mark. That is, half of them could not even score 50%. I mean, more than 73% of them could not score half, which is 400. Total mark obtainable is 400. And, majority of them, 73%, could not even go beyond the 200 mark, and which got so many persons wondering what is happening, what is attributed for these. Is it because of distractions? Many educationists were talking on the matter. Some students spoke on the matter as well and say something happened, especially some of them who have written an exam before, who scored far higher before, and now they are writing the exams, who couldn't secure admission at the time, who, wrote the exams again. They are getting far below. Something happened. Could it be logistic? Could it be technical issues? And there were outcries, and there were defense on the part of the government to say, okay, especially the Minister of Education saying, maybe that can be attributed to the high technological involvement in writing the examinations that block out leakages. Maybe that's why we are having this. But that cry, got so loud, and, it got stakeholders to really have a review and a rethink. But yesterday, there was another twist to that when the Jamb Registrar himself, Is-haq Oloyede, granted a press conference and let the cat out of the bag. Take a look.
As Registrar of Jamb, I hold myself personally responsible including for the negligence of the service provider and I unreservedly apologize for it. And the trauma it has affected Nigerians to, directly or indirectly. We have decided that all the candidates affected in the 157 centers of the 882 be contacted to retake their examinations. These candidates are to be contacted through text messages addressed to their registered phone number from tomorrow, their email addresses, their profiles, and phone calls by Jamb. They are directed to reprint their examination slips for the rescheduled examination dates.
All right, that was Jamb Registrar, Professor Is-haq Oloyede. And by the way, to clarify what I said earlier, it wasn't 73%, more than 78%, 78.5% to be exact, of candidates scored less than 200 of the 400 maximum obtainable points. So we are being joined today by a stakeholder, somebody who speaks for everything that has to do with education, an education advocate, and the executive director at I Read Believe Initiative, Jacob Sule, joins us virtually. Thank you for joining us, Jacob.
Good morning, Femi, and thank you for having me.
Yes. What do you make of this development? From the time the result was released, 13th of May, last Friday or thereabout, to the outcries, to the admittance of Jamb through his registrar, what we have right now? Your impression?
That's a very great question. First, let me thank you again. It's great to be back on your station to discuss this issue of the Joint Admission Matriculation Board. My opinion on this is that it is very, very disastrous and very unfortunate that this is a situation in which we have to deal with in the 21st century. It's very sad that after multiple times invested in building a system that's allegedly supposed to regulate admissions, we have seen a very sad situation where they have not paid proper attention to the duties of Jamb. What we have seen is a regulatory body that has become a revenue-generating organization for the federal government. Jamb, yes, has been around for a very long time, but unfortunately, Jamb has failed in its responsibility. And I need to be very clear. This is the first time in which we're seeing a public figure like Professor Is-haq Oloyede, whom I hold in high esteem, accept their shortcomings and has gone ahead to lead Jamb in a way to tender an apology. However, an apology isn't the way forward. Students have been subjected to trauma and discomfort, and I think it's time for Professor Is-haq Oloyede to step aside and allow somebody else to lead that organization, or at best have Jamb serve as an advocacy body and no longer conduct entrance exams or scrutiny for candidates who are seeking to enroll in our institution. Jamb has been around for a very long time, and I think this error is highly regrettable, and I don't think we can excuse the incompetencies of those who are charged with those responsibilities at Jamb at this moment. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sule. Looking at the current situation, about 379,997 candidates had to retake the examination. About 6 states were affected. Let's talk about 5 states in the southeast and, of course, Lagos State. My question is this: let's look at the demographic now. Those who were affected, the majority of them from the southeast. For instance, the ASU, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, University of Nigeria chapter, has threatened to take Jamb to court. And here's the reason. For University of Nigeria Secondary School, in that center, no candidate scored up to 200 in the 2025 UTM examination. My question to you, Mr. Sule, is this: how on earth could Jamb have released the results? That's a question. Is it that they don't go through the result before releasing them? For a whole center not to have a single candidate scoring up to 200, and it's affected a lot of centers in the southeast, in the entire southeast zone. Is it that they did not check this? Is it that, was there no review of results before the release? It would have been better if they did not, some people say it would have been better if they did not release such results in the first place. Now, they released it, and after releasing it, they were justifying it. Even the Minister of Education was trying to give reasons why the results were so, saying that, oh, they did very well. It was because they put some anti-cheating measures in place, which means they did not review those results before releasing, only for them to come back to say, we are sorry. Is that really enough? The question is, do you think that they did a thorough job to review those results before releasing them?
Thank you so much, Emeka. Very important question. But before I go into the question, I want to set a narrative so we're clear and we have a clear direction of where we're headed to. Number one, I want us to be very careful so that we don't bring in an ethnic coloration into this crisis that is rocking Jamb at this very time.
No, sorry, Mr. Sule, it is a fact. It's a fact. We are stating the fact. So there's nothing ethnic. It is a fact you are stating. 5 states in the southeast are affected. So those are the facts.
And Lagos.
And Lagos, yes. So those are the facts.
I agree with you, but I'm making a categorical statement that we have to be careful so that we don't bring in ethnic coloration into the crisis rocking Jamb because of the categorical statement about saying Southeast. I have read through the public statement issued by Jamb, by the registrar. There were so many things that went on during that exam process. According to Jamb, for the first time, they revealed the process in which results are being conducted to the public. And in the press release, they did said that they have a system called the KAD, which is CAD, and the LAG. These two systems are the ones in which exams are being coordinated. So for those in the south and those in the northern part of Nigeria, they have a process in which these things are being coordinated. However, in that statement, Jamb admitted that they noticed a challenge with this system on April 25th, which means this was on Friday, on the second day of the examination. Now, what did that say? Jamb in its own said must have taken time to actually review what has gone wrong. However, Jamb did not take due diligence in ensuring that that situation was properly arrested. It is unfortunate that we now have a situation where people are now making comments that why is it that people in the Southeast have been said to have not performed creditably in this exam. And if you look at the statistics in which Jamb has released, they said about 92 centers were affected in this whole crisis, comprising of Lagos State. And then in the southeast eastern states, they also mentioned specific figures of centers that were affected. Emeka, I need to be very clear with you. Jamb has failed in its responsibility to ensure due diligence and making sure that those results are properly checked. And you know, the sad part about all of this is that this is a body that has a duty to ensure and perform at its power, but that duty has failed woefully. And you know, what I would actually call for is we need to find a way to test our legal jurisprudence for the students who have suffered this untold hardship. The legal jurisprudence of Nigeria makes way for a class action. So I would categorically encourage those who have suffered this situation to go approach the court and test our legal jurisprudence, take an action against Jamb and see what the court process would subject us to in all of this. And also as regards what can be done, Jamb hasn't done regrettably well. We cannot excuse the registrar because he's come on national TV to shed tears. The days of shedding tears are over. Professor Is-haq Oloyede was appointed as registrar 2016 following the completion of the then registrar, Professor Dibu Ojerinde. And if we look at the trajectory of the current registrar, we have only seen a body that is only focused on revenue generation. The core of this body has been let aside. You now have a body that is only competing on how much we can generate for the federal government. And if you look at the statistics from 2018 to date, Jamb has said to have remitted over 3-point-something billion naira to the US government. What is the business of such an agency that has to coordinate exams, entry tests for intending higher institution graduates, and your focus is just only about revenue generation?
All right, Dr. Sulega, sorry to cut in. Coming back to the main question now. The question is, don't you think that it's just as a result of negligence? Because I'm quite concerned. Why should they release such results? Shouldn't they have sat down to see that, hey, there might be something wrong here? So that's a question. So how come a whole organization, the whole Jamb organization, did not see this? They saw the result and they released them like that. It should have been better if they said, oh, we are stepping down the result. We are going through the result, doing some investigations, but they went ahead to release such result. Does it show negligence or irresponsibility on the part of Jamb as an organization?
I would answer your question directly, and according to what the registrar himself has said, he has admitted blame and addressed the issue of their negligence. So if you listen carefully to the public statement that the registrar issued, he did categorically said that Jamb was negligent. So I am not taking brief for the agency, but I can categorically tell you that yes, this is gross incompetence. Jamb was negligent, and there must be consequences for actions as this that run foul of competency from such an organization like that. So clearly, Jamb was negligent, it failed in its responsibility, and however, a public cry by the registrar would not absolve the registrar of its shortcomings. And I strongly admit that the registrar should be asked to step aside and a more competent person should be appointed to lead Jamb at this time. Professor Is-haq Oloyede, yes, very outstanding professor of Islamic studies, but I think he's done his part and he should step aside and allow somebody else lead the organization. And this is a call to Mr. President, if indeed he cares about education and the renewed hope agenda in which he has been championing about for a couple of months, he should step into the situation, relieve the Jamb Registrar of his role and appoint somebody else to lead that organization. And if possible, that organization has outlived its existence and universities should be allowed to conduct exams by themselves and screen candidates for admissions into the colleges and universities that we have across Nigeria. Thank you.
All right. Now, let's take it one after the other. The response of Jamb to this, one would say, maybe they have shown some level of accountability that we don't often see in public service by, admittance of culpability, as far as this development is concerned. But then one would say some of the tone, especially on their social media handles, official social media handles, will show that maybe they are being clever by half, or possibly there is the disconnect between the Media and Public Department of Media and Publicity Department of Jamb and their registrar. Because take a look at this tweet, we put it up now, where they said, "Man proposes and God disposes. It has been established that a technical glitch affected 157 centers out of the 887 centers in the 2025 UTME. This was basically responsible for the general low performance of the candidates scheduled to sit the examination in those centers. As such, all the affected candidates will be contacted to reprint their examination slips towards retaking their examinations starting from 16th of May 2025. Now, Jacob, many persons have been saying this lacks empathy. This is just too plain and flat. And by the time you start an official, publication of an agency like Jamb that's supposed to be part of the institutions working towards development of education in Nigeria, starting a statement with "Man proposes, God disposes," meaning we can try, but anything can happen. But now looking, this was released at about 5 p.m. yesterday. But now looking at the public outburst, emotional outburst of their registrar, crying and saying they are culpable and they are responsible for this. How do you connect such?
Femi, thank you for that. Nigeria is an over-religious country, and we mostly tend to try to absolve our leaders of their inadequacies by saying God would step in. I'm a Christian, do not misunderstand that, a practicing Christian for that, and I hold my relationship with God very carefully. That public statement trying to absolve itself of its shortcomings is a very irresponsible statement. This has nothing to do with, the rider in which you used to describe the statement. For crying out loud, this is a public service. And we expect that persons who are charged with this responsibility are competent, skilled, and well-educated. What has God got to do with the inefficiencies of human or persons that are charged with this duty? And if you look at the statement across board, what clearly happened was a human error. It has nothing to do with God. Probably somebody charged with its responsibility to run a patch on the software that was supposed to address this result issue failed deliberately in their responsibility. So we shouldn't, as a religious country, like put everything on God. The issue is clear. Jamb has failed in its responsibility to do what it was supposed to do. And this raises question on how long has these inadequacies been in the system. Last year, we saw a situation whereby a student was allegedly to have said that our results were not the same thing that she got. The question we should be asking ourselves is, has this been a sustained or continued inadequacies on the part of Jamb? And look at the reckless statement in which the registrar made after the results, claiming that because students now spend more time on social media and that technology and all of that are the reasons why they are failed. These are persons who were quick to address the press, celebrating the failure percentage rates of students, rather than sitting down and asking questions, how did we get here? In Nigeria, we celebrate mediocrity and not quality. So to be very honest with you, that statement is reckless. It doesn't absolve Jamb of its inadequacies and its incompetencies. And I repeat again, I encourage every student who has suffered any form of trauma to approach our courts, test the system, let a class action be instituted so that we can know that laws are there for reasons, and whoever has been found wanting in Jamb should be brought to book and then sanctioned as the laws. We cannot continue in this 21st century to give excuses for an agency or an institution that has a duty to regulate admissions and has turned itself to become a revenue-generating organization competing with the likes of FIRS and Custom. It is uncalled for, and that cannot stand in our country.
All right, Mr. Sule. All right, like you rightly said, it was a system failure. It has nothing to do with God. Again, let's look at other places. There are other examinations in other countries, examinations that run in multiple countries simultaneously, and they do not have such problems. I give examples at the beginning of the program, talking about examinations like TOEFL, that's test of English as a foreign language, and IELTS. They write these examinations in multiple countries, and they do not have such challenges. So again, like you said, it has nothing to do with God. It is a system failure. But Mr. Sule, let's look at the bigger picture here. Apart from Jamb Registrar, apart from the Jamb Registrar himself, Professor Is-haq Oloyede, who is just an individual who decided to take responsibility for the failure of the system, let us look at our education system as a whole in Nigeria. Let's look at the Ministry of Education. Let's talk about Dr. Tunji Bello, Tunji Alausa rather, who came out, the Minister of Education, who came out after the results were released. And like you said, he was also celebrating, saying that, the students failed simply because they put in place anti-cheating measures. What does this say about the minister himself? You saw such a result. Instead of investigating, instead of asking questions, he decided to jump into conclusion and celebrate the mass failure of students. What does that say about our system as a nation, about our educational system? If the Minister of Education could come out and make such a public statement, it shows that he too was not responsible enough to have done his investigations to ascertain the true reason for the mass failure. Rather, he chose to jump into conclusion. So what does that say about the Minister of Education, about the Ministry of Education, and about our educational system as a whole in Nigeria?
Thank you so much, Emeka. My position about the current minister, whom I hold in very high regard, is in a public space. You would recall when he was appointed as a substantive Minister of Education, I did author an article saying that Nigeria's education does not need prescriptions. We need experts to lead the Ministry of Education. And I'm not surprised the minister has made that comment, justifying the percentage of failure recorded in this year's Jamb. And this goes back to the question of competency and not just political appointment to lead a Ministry of Education. The current commissioner, the current Minister of Health is a trained physician from the United States of America. He has no background in education per se. And, you know, the argument then was that you only need somebody who is a policy expert to lead the Ministry of Education. No, we have many qualified civil servants rather, with quality degree in education that could have led the Ministry of Education. And this goes to the question of putting round pegs in round hole. I do not want to go into like the details of my position on where I stand about rating the minister, but like I said, and I issued some weeks ago on my Twitter space, it will take for me maybe another 1 year to actually make a public statement on whether or not the minister is leading the ministry in the right direction. I do have my reservations, although there are some times in which I have publicly alluded to the fact that he is actually doing some things that are right. But generally, I don't think that statement by the minister is appropriate. And also to address this issue, for too long we have had a system of education whereby the needs of the Nigerian system is not carefully addressed into. Since the time of Madam Obi Ezekwesili as the then former Minister of Education, we haven't had any credible Minister of Education lead that ministry. All we have seen are political appointments, persons who are probably loyal to the president. At one time, we had a Minister of Education in which we couldn't even see him on national TV. We were all like, it's so bad. So the state of education in Nigeria, like I've always maintained in my widely published scholarly articles, needs proper overhauling. Nigeria is so blessed with resources. Nigeria has multiple scholars in the field of education who can steer the fortune of Nigeria's education. And as I stand here to make this comment, I have not given up on the state of education in Nigeria. I still strongly believe that Nigeria would get it right, but we have to start by retooling the experts and persons in which we appoint to lead the Ministry of Education. So on that note, I would say that the minister's comment was inappropriate, and I think he should have done due diligence. And I hope by now he should have ordered a full investigation to really understand what really happened. And again, like I said, Professor Is-haq Oloyede should be relieved of his duty and ask somebody else more competent to.
But don't you think the minister should resign too? Don't you think? Not just Professor Is-haq Oloyede. Don't you think the minister himself should resign as well?
I mean, if I were, we just have to be, if I were the president, I would call for an immediate removal of the minister. Like I've always maintained, the minister, the ministry should be led by somebody competent who has the core expertise in education and not a medical doctor leading our education ministry. How would you feel if a teacher, I'm not disparaging teachers, but how would you feel if a non-medical expert is being appointed as the Minister of Health to lead Nigeria's Ministry of Health? So we should, as a nation, continue to advocate for proper quality and real competent leaders to lead our Ministry of Education. We need a trained educator who has gone through the 4 walls of a university to earn a degree in education to lead our Ministry of Education, and not a medical doctor or a physician to lead the ministry at this time. That is where I stand.
All right. Now, we still have a lot to talk about because, an independent organization was officially invited to be part of this. That's Educare, led by Alex Onya, in this investigation. And he came up with his findings. We look into that and, dig more, so that this is about Jamb today. What happens to NECO? What happens to, other examination conducting bodies in Nigeria? In fact, the state of the education in Nigeria itself. All of those will be after now. Stay with us. All right. We have been speaking with education advocate and the executive director at I Reach to Live initiative, Jacob Sule, bearing his mind on the recent development. Quite a sad one, by the way, we must say. But and that has to do with the controversial 2025 UTME result that was released last week and what has heralded it till now. Where yesterday, Professor Is-haq Oloyede, Jamb Registrar, admitted that there were errors, technical errors. They call it glitches. When Nigerians are saying it's like these words always cost Nigerians something very important on a national scale. You remember the INEC technical glitch, which, through the electoral process and everything to frenzy, and now we're having the national Jamb technical glitch as well, which has really sent some students into some traumatic experience, and which sadly one Tibile from Lagos State lost her life because she committed suicide for an abysmal result that she got. Now, these are the issues. Now, many persons have been calling for independent investigation beyond what Jamb did, but then when they were trying to do that, they officially invited Educare to be part, of that investigation, and that is being led by Alex Onyia, in which he said, as yesterday, that his team have arrived Jamb headquarters, and his engineering team rather, and then they got into the matter. So later in the day, he released a statement, which is scrolling on your screen right now, where he said, "I promised I will share a detailed technical report of what happened after a review with Jamb core system." Carefully read it, please. I will be fast with this, quite lengthy. Jamb 2025 UTME technical review report. And it said on Tuesday, 14th of May, a high-level technical review session was convened at the Jamb headquarters in Abuja. And the meeting presided over by the registrar was initiated in direct response to the mass outcry that followed the release of the UTME 2025 exam. And the objective of the gathering was to unravel the root causes behind the unexpectedly poor candidate performance. And that, going ahead because of time, the meeting began promptly at 10 a.m. and was attended by a distinguished panel of stakeholders. And with everybody involved, discussions commenced with a comprehensive analysis of the existing system architecture. The discussion further investigated the existence and efficacy of randomization mechanisms for both questions and answer options. Attention then shifted to the scoring and margin logic. This line of inquiry included assessing the capability of the system to reconstruct question and answer mappings and evaluate response accuracy with complete transparency. And now to another paragraph, the team also rigorously examined Jamb's quality assurance and testing frameworks, and because of time, they highlighted how and what works. Very important to note that while the improvements were technologically sound in theory, a major operational flaw was uncovered during the implementation phase. The system patch necessary to support both shuffling and source-based validation have been fully deployed on the server cluster supporting the Kaduna zone, but it was not applied to the Lagos cluster, which services centers in Lagos and the southeast. This omission persisted across all sessions until the 17th session, after which the error was discovered and directed. As a result, approximately 92 centers in the southeast and 65 centers in the Lagos, totaling 157 centers, operated using outdated server logic that could not appropriately handle the new answer submission marking structure. These affected an estimated 379,997 candidates whose results were severely impacted to system mismatches during answer validation. Many things were discovered there. Now, Jacob, a bit by bit, investigation was done, by Educare, led by Alex on here, and Jamb themselves, and they outlined what really happened, the kind of clusters that was done at a point in which some of those things stopped working, and later they discovered that, oh, this was what really happened. What will you say? Do you think, it's sad to ask you this question, that we are not matured, for technologically driven adventures in Nigeria? Because you remember what happened with the INEC thing, that's not the basis of discussion this morning. But this is a pattern that is costing Nigeria its trust with its people. Now, this has been discovered with Jamb. Some will say, okay, Jamb has come out to say this is what really happened. For glitches then, glitches now, as a nation, more than 64 years old, we are still battling with glitches on a national scale. One will say, these platforms, are they not tested? Are there not mock testings that were done How do we get to this level? Or do you smell a sabotage within the system?
For me, to answer your question directly, I disagree with you that Nigeria is not ripe for technological advancement. That is a fallacy that I don't share, and I don't share that philosophy. Nigeria has been around for more than 64 years after independence, and I think Nigeria is matured enough. I know for a fact Nigeria is matured enough to run its country with the required technology. The issue with Jamb is it's not about the inefficiency of Nigeria's technological system. It is a clear incompetence on the part of those whose responsibility were charged to carry out, like I said earlier, to run a patch to allow those affected states to be able to use the updated current system of Jamb. Now, if you look at that press statement issued by Alex, which I've taken my time to read, there were a couple of things that were highlighted. The intention of Jamb was very clear. Jamb had gone ahead to make 3 systemic changes in preparation for the 2025 UTME exam. Jamb had moved from a count-based system to a source-based result verification. That is first to show that Jamb indeed has a genuine intention to make the system much more standardized. Secondly, Jamb had also moved from the process of introducing full randomization of question and answers. What does that mean? If 2 candidates are in the same hall and are sitting next to each other, candidate A would not have the same question with candidate B, meaning that if a candidate sits close to each other and there's an attempt to cheat or ask for answers or support, those candidates will be shooting themselves on the foot. The third part was that the performance upgrade system, which is where the issue came from, was where this whole problem came from. The performance system that captures the ones in lag, that is Lagos and its environs, and then the ones in CAD and Kaduna and the northeast eastern part, where the challenges came from. Individuals were appointed, people are being paid salary on that role to run a patch. So this is not an issue of saying Nigeria is not ripe for incorporation of technology into its system. This is a clear, I want to be very careful with it. This is a clear indictment on the competency of those who are employed and assigned to run that part for INEC. So clearly, Nigeria is ripe.
Jacob, rather, I had to ask that. Sorry for butting in. I had to ask that because this has a national dimension. It is not just one local or state exams, respectfully speaking, it has a national dimension and is prepared for, budgeted for every year. That's why I had to ask that, because an independent private organization came in to work with Jamb, and less than 24 hours, they unraveled everything. Meaning, if such organization, although they work with Jamb, could do that in the space of less than 24 hours, so what happened to people that are being paid nationally as an organization, and all this is all they could come up with? That's why I added that caveat. That question, are you smelling a sabotage here, or is just a systemic failure?
I don't think this is a sabotage, to be very honest with you, and to be very frank. This is not a sabotage. This is a clear irresponsibility on the part of those appointed to lead this agency of government. Femi, let me be very clear with you. These are persons who probably went through the old system of education in Nigeria. I would say the analog age, with due respect to whoever was appointed or whose duty is to run this patch. Nigeria has moved away from the world has moved away from an analog type of learning. And that's why I'm strongly advocating for a younger person who is tech savvy to lead institutions like this. We cannot continue to rely on our old men who probably went to school with typewriters, who cannot even, it is sad, but clearly it is not a sabotage. It is a clear incompetence and shortfall of persons who were paid and employed to do a particular job. So clearly Nigeria is ripe for technological advancement, and young people who have this expertise and skills, who have widely studied abroad, should be appointed to lead agencies of government and not come and give us a national disgrace and say, oh, glitches and this, glitches and that. We are done with those excuses, and we need competent people to lead these critical agencies in Nigeria.
All right, Mr. Sule. So far, Jamb has been carrying out their activities without any form of oversight so far that we can see. Do you think at this point, judging from the recent occurrences, that Jamb, going forward, there should be an independent oversight of Jamb's processes and technology to avoid such mass failures?
To be very direct with you, I would say that at this point, I don't think we need an oversight agency to, to conduct an oversight on Jamb's testing. Jamb has outlived its purpose. It is now becoming a shadow of itself. Jamb needs to be set aside. Universities are competent enough. They conduct semester exams. They conduct multiple types.
But sorry to cut in, Mr. Sule. We still have the SAT in the United States.
I agree with you, Emeka. What I'm saying is the Jamb has outlived its purpose, and then universities should be allowed to conduct entrance exams for candidates who are interested in attending those institutions. You alluded to the fact of SAT. SAT is a much more standardized exams that is approved across board. It may also interest you that there are some universities in the United States that no longer require candidates to actually sit for the SAT, because the SAT has been said to not be a genuine and fair reflection of student candidacy. There are students who don't do well with testing, and you can't say because, oh, Mr. A did not score the required percentile to get admitted into a top college or an Ivy League college, such persons would not be offered a spot into university. I authored a paper 2 years ago on admission preference in the US, where I compared Nigeria and the system in which we have here in the US. And I compared and make very strongly policy recommendations on what the US can learn from Nigeria's education, and also what Nigeria can also learn from the American educational system. So clearly, I don't think this is an issue that is up for debate. Jamb has stayed, it has been a very fantastic institution since I was born. It's been existing, but I think we need to move away from the old way of doing things and let civilization and technology advancement take over our system.
But Mr. Sule, sorry to cut in. Some people would argue that ideally Jamb should give candidates a level playing ground. Now, if it should be decentralized, if Nigerian universities are allowed to conduct examinations on their own, how would they be checked? Again, they can decide to start, there might be some form of, malpractices, shoddy deals here and there just to make sure they just admit students they want to admit. But when students write Jamb, ideally, when you score very high in Jamb, you can go to any institution and you get admitted. So don't you think by giving university authority to conduct their own exams, there might be some, Nigerian students might be shortchanged in the long run?
No, Emeka, I disagree with you that candidates who have scored high in Jamb can go to any university of their choice. I'm going to give you a little bit of data for you to probably play with this morning. In 2024, Utme, about 1.8 million students results were released. Out of those 1.8 million, only 8,401 candidates scored above 300 and above. 77,050 candidates scored about 250 and above. Now, we also have about 439,000 scoring below 200 and above. And also, the cumulative of this showed that approximately 77.1% of the candidates failed that exam. What is the fate of those students? Have they been admitted into any tertiary institutions in Nigeria? No. They would come back year in, year out again and pay for another testing fee. This is how Jamb generates its revenue. So we need to move away from asking Jamb to be the only body testing students' eligibility to write exams. I have confidence in Nigerian universities, and I have no doubt there may be some shortcomings, but I think universities are fortified enough to conduct exams. And so if you're saying that universities should not, so why then do we have a multiplicity of system? I've been writing Jamb. Universities conduct post-UTME screenings. Why haven't there been multiple reservations or cries about the credibility of that? We haven't recorded any of such comments in a very long time. So I still stand on my point that universities should be allowed to conduct testing skills and entrance exam for candidates who are interested in enrolling in those institutions, and Jamb should be set aside.
All right. Now, we now have, as part of what Professor Is-haq Oloyede said in that press, at that press conference yesterday, where, he got emotional with the whole of things, although many persons had these issues with that, either rightly or wrongly to say, was that necessary? Another part, now, two questions for me. The first one is, when he was speaking, and maybe we should take a look again, and those persons that were at his back, maybe they were staff members, management staff that were clapping. What exactly for? Were you clapping for? Encouraging the man to keep speaking, or that he has done the best, at that place? I wish you can have that again. And they kept clapping at everything the man said. What does that make us as a people? Actually, just take a look, maybe for like a minute, and then we'll come to it.
Irresponsible, including for the negligence of the service provider and I unreservedly apologize for it.
While all of those was going on, and maybe every time the man was having issues with moving on and speaking, they were apologizing. What exactly for? What does that show us to be? Do you think that's an issue, or it's just some group of people, encouraging their registrar?
Nigeria is a continued show of national drama and embarrassment to us as a nation. I see nothing credible or anything fantastic, and the need for those so-called employees, I don't know if they're employees, I cannot verify the identity, to continue to cheer on the registrar for admitting the errors in which they have. And that is how we celebrate mediocrity in Nigeria. What is worth the round of applause that those folks behind the registrar were celebrating was like, make sense of it. In sane society, the registrar will be on his way out. And that's why I made a tweet yesterday. If the then former Vice President, Yemi Osibajo, was president, I'm very sure by now the registrar will have been shown out. As you can see, the way in which it decisively came in when the then DG of the DSS was found wanting in his duties. So there is nothing commendable in clapping. Are you cheering his shortcomings, or what exactly was the purpose of that?
Exactly.
I find out very disgusting.
Yeah,
and
but because of time, my other question is this. Now, as far as righting the wrong is concerned in this particular ugly development, the professor has said from 16th to 19th or thereabout, there will be another round of examinations to those affected. But Nigerians are saying, isn't this too early? Are we not going to fall in the same pit? Maybe not exactly the same pit. You just admitted yesterday. All of a sudden today, you are saying, oh, you are going to start the process of righting the wrong by tomorrow. Did he take into consideration the logistics behind all of these? In fact, when those exams were being written, some parents have to take some off, from their work, take excuse to say, oh, I'm going, because some of them will come to the examination all of premises as early as 6:30 a.m. You admitted yesterday, and 2 days later, you said the process of, doing this particular round of exam will begin. Do you think that's workable, really? Or it's just, not getting it right? Because it's not just about the student. How about the parents, the caregivers, the guardians that will take them there, and the student themselves? The fact that they prepare for that one and it went the way it went doesn't mean they don't have to prepare for this one as well. 2 days grace. How does that work?
I think, Femi, again, that is the anyhowness of the Nigerian elite that we have. Like I issued yesterday on X, and like you rightly said, how do you move from a major error and barely 48 hours, you're asking this affected candidate who are probably traumatized to now prepare again for sit for those exams? The question is, what has Jamb done to restore the confidence in this institution for young persons to return back to the exam or to start preparing for these exams? Keep in mind, many of these students had been studying for this exam for more than 1 year. I had supported more than 50 students in this past Jamb, paid for their, fees to write these exams. None of them could even boast of 300 scores. And now you're asking those same affected students within the space of 48 hours to prepare again to sit for these exams. I think this anyhowness in the Nigerian civil society, in the Nigerian civil service needs to be nipped in the bud. What I would expect INEC to do would be, what I would expect Jamb to do in this situation is to pump the brakes. Yes, we have heard. What is the way forward? First, let there be a mandatory system deployment validation. Let there be a centralized digital dashboard to actually track where the issue came from and then provide solution across the entire CBT centers where these things were, where these challenges came from. Secondly, Jamb should take the bull by the horn by scheduling annual pre-examination audits, not just wait when exams are 2 weeks or 3 weeks and then you start issuing public statements in the sake of saving your face and doing all of that. No, the third thing that Jamb should be doing is real-time monitoring the infrastructures in which they have in place. If you have servers, monies were budgeted for all of these servers. Budgetary allocations were made, monies were paid to Jamb and all of that. They should set up automated alerts to check for anomalies, either in scoring, either in upgrading or what have you. Those processes should be done. And then there should also be a path whereby candidates can challenge the outcome of their results without being penalized. When Jamb does all of this, then I think there should be a proper engagement and redress method in addressing subsequent issue. Until all of this is done, I see no reason why Jamb is in a hurry to schedule an exams for 48 hours after you have been found wanting and you have failed in your one sole responsibility of conducting exams and you're rushing. Why the rush? And I think this goes to the larger picture of Nigeria. We do a lot of charismatic, like things that are like, we do a lot of superficial things in the sake that we are doing Nigerians a benefit. No, Jamb should pump the brakes, return to the drawing board, take full responsibility for its actions, and then set forth guidelines on how they can address these issues moving forward. So I really do not agree that, it's like the notice of the 24 hours is quite very too short for students who must have gone through trauma. And I don't think that's an appropriate thing to do at this time.
All right, Mr. Sule, you have suggested that Jamb should be proscribed, that they have outlived their relevance as a body, as an organization in Nigeria. So let's just assume, hypothetically, that the federal government decides to, proscribe the organization and say, hey, you've done enough. Let's now have universities, conducting their own entrance examinations. My question is, what kind of regulations should be put in place to check these universities? I mean, talking about funding for the examination, should there be regulations, to stipulate what they charge students? Will it be uniform? Will it be standards, be uniform? Because again, we have a lot of universities. New universities are popping up every day in Nigeria. Just recently, a new one was approved for Benue State, I think about 3. So we are having a lot of institutions in Nigeria. So if we should decide to decentralize the entrance examination system, what form of regulations should be put in place to ensure uniformity and at the same time ensure that the students are not at the receiving end?
Very important question. This is what I've been looking out for. In fact, my doctoral program is actually focusing on how universities and higher education can be run in Nigeria. Before I go into the recommendation, you would agree with me that even right now with the system we have, we do not have uniformity when it comes to testing skills and getting admission into schools. There's this so-called principle called federal character principle, where somebody who scored 200 from a particular region of the country.
Yeah, they call it catchment area. That's
yes.
true.
So I think, yeah, it's a catchment area and also the federal character principle, or whatever name in which we call it, or preferential admission, which we call in the US affirmative action. The system has not been fair from the beginning. And I think for this to move forward, universities, yes, there should be a body. That's why you have the National University Commission, who has oversight function across anything educational system in Nigeria. Equally, when universities are allowed to conduct exams, the NUC should set specific threshold and benchmark that must be fulfilled for universities to proceed with scheduling exams and all of that. The issue of charges or what have you, that should be at the sole discretion of the university, whereas NUC can play the situation of a regulatory body, which is its main body to advise universities on a cap in which those universities must charge and must not go beyond. But NUC should not mandate these universities on how much to be charged. Secondly, there should be a policy-wide statement on the way forward for admissions. There should be fair equality, and like, let admissions be done, not one X from the northern part scoring 170 and getting admissions to one of our prestigious university in the south, and that same person who has scored that same score cannot get that same or cannot get an equal course in the northern part of the country. No, what I'm advocating for is that if there would be a regulatory body, we need to return back to the drawing board and say, if universities would conduct entrance exams or testing exams for candidates who are seeking admission into university, it must be equal across board. That would be my own contribution.
All right. And, we are on the home stretch right now. Final question from me is, now, at every sphere of endeavor, especially the knowledge economy, you see professionals trooping out. We read so much of those reports from the headlines today in our papers, in which even at Lute, Augusta University Teaching Hospital, that even when they have the infrastructure right now, the personnel are trooping out. And, in the education as well, lecturers sometimes, in fact, Lagos State was complaining yesterday that some professionals that they train, they support for training outside of the country don't come back. The jackpot thing has affected almost everywhere. Some lecturers, when they go out for training, they don't return. And I can see you smiling yourself. Possibly yourself, you are part of those people who are outside of the country. Now, what does this signify even now? Let's assume these students are now in these universities. Some of the existing ones, those who are working right now, they are complaining of a poor working environment. The few ones who could gather some money, but who go for training cannot come back. So what exactly even are they in for right now? The quality of education in our tertiary institutions.
Great question for me, but let me quickly make this comment. I am pro-Nigeria. I would always be a proud Nigerian regardless of whatever I am. I had expressed this to the chair of your station, Dr. Adifla, when I met him a couple of weeks ago in the US. I am very proud of Nigeria. And at the end of my academic sojourn, I'm definitely looking forward to returning back to the country to contribute my expertise and skill to supporting education in Nigeria. Having said that, it is sad that things are the way they are in Nigeria. But I think the way in which we can address this generally is to improve the working condition and compensation of public civil servants in Nigeria. Let us pay competitively in both private and public sector. Let there be performance-based incentives. Let there be healthcare insurances. Pension should be paid adequately, and not that after 35 years of service, people are queuing up to get paid their allowances. No, let there be promotion, and then let us encourage remote and flexible work. And also, let there be a system that's strengthening career and professional development of employees.
All right.
Let us train people on the job. Let there be mentoring, and then let us create enabling environments for innovation, not rely on this old 1960 or 1980 mentality and then begin to run a country like that.
Right.
And also, we must begin to engage the Nigerians in diaspora. A couple of months ago, when the Minister of Education was here at the World Bank, I was privileged to be in that set. And I told him there's a need for us to leverage on the strength of the Nigerians in diaspora. We have a lot of resources in which we can give to support the Nigerian system. And lastly, let there be local retention programs. It is sad that, I have always made this point. Education is quite cheap in Nigeria, and I'm grateful for the education in which I've gotten in Nigeria. I've actually gone through all types of education in Nigeria, and at the public school, the private school, at the tertiary, primary, secondary. So I am truly a very proud advocate of Nigeria's education. But however, where the environment is not encouraging, where there are no retention programs, where we don't celebrate success, where there is no solid sector reform, and where they, I can talk more about how I love Nigeria, but when these basic things are not done, people will continue to japa. And clearly, I am not an anti-japa advocate. In fact, I advise young people to seek greener pastures. Already. However, when you're seeking greener pastures, you must find a way to return back to the country and give back to your country, regardless of whatever you find yourself.
All right, Mr. Sule, you are currently studying in the United States. One of the metrics for rating universities around the world is their percentage, their number of international students. Let's look at Nigeria, for instance. How many international students do we attract to Nigeria? In your opinion, what can be done to improve our educational system so that we can attract international students to our universities, thereby increasing our world rankings, talking about our universities in Nigeria?
That's a very great question. And, I am aware that there are new institutions in Nigeria, public institutions, where the chancellors and, the leadership of these universities are now leveraging on the diaspora network and also encouraging people to give back to the community. I think the way we can do that is to continue to leverage and, leverage on technology. As I speak to you right now, I am currently serving as an adjunct in one of the Nigerian public university, just to give back to those university where I teach virtually, not because I am seeking any immediate or delayed gratification. It's just a way to give back to the system in which has given me a lot, in which I have achieved in Nigeria. And again, how do we attract international students? The only way in which we can attract these students is when our universities are properly funded. The lives of students who are in those schools are safe and secured. Many years ago, we read about the Chibok issue, Boko Haram storming schools and all of that. Nobody abroad wants to send his or her kid to that kind of system to get education. And also, we need to deal with this issue of strike action. And most importantly, our curriculum needs to be overhauled. You can't send people who've lived abroad for a very long time to come to Nigeria and study study programs that are not deliberately equipping people for the outside world, outside of what you have in Nigeria. So to put your question in perspective, we need to, like I said, charity begins at home. Until we fix our local problems in Nigeria, we cannot indeed attract foreign or international students into Nigeria. Right. And the only way we can do that is to have critical conversations. Let our curriculum or our curricula be overhauled. Let us incorporate tech advancement into our educational system, encourage remote learnings. Let there be company-based, or I would say work-based experience where students can actually learn. And then let us also advocate for a system where students are being encouraged to go on maybe internships in organizations that would give them the skills that they need to run.
But do you see Nigeria? Do you see Nigeria getting there anytime soon? Do you see
Absolutely.
Nigeria getting there anytime
Emeka,
soon?
I see Nigeria getting there very soon. Like I said, I have very strong confidence in Nigeria. We are not where we used to be. I went to a private university in Nigeria. I also went to a public university, both at the federal and state level. So I can tell you comfortably that the way in which it was 5 years ago isn't the same in which we have now. We now have private universities that are leveraging on professors abroad, and that's why I must give a shout out to Osun State University, where I learned, where I earned my law degree. The university is doing absolutely fantastic work, even though I understand that there may be some shortcomings. The university is doing so well, and I also must give a shout out to the immediate past Vice Chancellor, Professor Labo Kokola, who has taken the university.
I'm sure you have your time to give you a shout out on one of these days.
Yes, I have to.
I'm have to pay for that.
You might get an invoice for what you're doing, but we must sincerely thank you for your time and your take this morning, bearing your minds on this national issue, which has really sent a disturbing wave to some homes, especially with the loss of that young lady, Timileyin, and our souls, our thoughts and our prayers are with our family. But then we hope the system gets better. It's good that public officers are accountable, but how about we do better by preventing some of these preventable embarrassments? And of course, we will do better as a nation. The executive director at Right to Live Initiative, and of course, an education advocate, Jacob Sule. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for me.
All right, these will be the size of the program today. An educated nation is a prosperous nation. Do the math if you don't have a nation that is educated. And then we don't want to be at that level. Femi Ojo is my name. I'm a Nigerian, and God bless Nigeria.
Absolutely. Emeka Daniel is my name. Thank you once again for joining us today on the program. Let's have a fresh edition tomorrow. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow on Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Don't forget, you can catch up on this conversation on our YouTube channel on Western Spring Television, on Facebook, on X, and of course on TikTok. Thank you once again for joining us. Do have a wonderful day.